My name is Hannah Kotek and I have a heart condition.
And what do you have, Hannah?
I had an atrial septal defect. I would say in 2021, my aunt Teresa, my dad's older sister, passed away when she was 53, I believe. Everyone was kind of in shock. My dad, he was in the midst of training for an Ironman. So my dad is a big athlete, and he went to his primary care doctor. It was just a regular routine checkup. He mentioned that he was doing the Ironman and also that his sister had recently passed away suddenly. And those things combined, his doctor was like, okay, let's just get an EKG, make sure everything's good. He got the EKG, and when they did that, they found a pretty large aortic aneurysm, and that was caused by a fused leaflet in his aortic valve. She said, okay girls, so I have something to tell you about your dad. He has to get open heart surgery. And when you drop something like that, it's like, oh, this is a really big scary thing. And I was like shocked, and I was scared, and I remember crying, and I was like, what does this mean? It was weird because we dropped him off and they wouldn't let me and my sister go up with him because this was, coming off the back end of really big, scary COVID. It was really scary saying, oh, okay, goodbye, but not goodbye, but possibly goodbye. You never know with this, you never know. There's no guarantee ever. And it was all very confusing, and I was looking at my sister like. And so over the summer there was some talk about me and my sister getting screened. My mom is telling me, okay, we're gonna have to go to Lurie Children's Hospital. We're just gonna get a checkup. We're just gonna make sure there's nothing wrong. You know how, your dad had this thing. We're gonna make sure you don't have the same thing. So we go to the room where we get our echoes, and the echo tech comes in. He's like, okay, lay on your side, lift up your gown. This was a 45-minute echocardiogram. They don't do that unless there's something to be seen or of note. Doctor knocks on the door, comes in. He's like, hi, girls. We're like, hello. He's like, okay, so good news. You don't have what your dad has. Neither of you have what your dad has. And then he looks at me and he goes, Hannah, my heart just drops into my stomach. You have what's called an atrial septal defect. And I was like, what is that? What does that mean? Like, what are you telling me right now? And he says, well, you have a hole in between your left and your right atrium. It means you're probably going to have surgery. It was this inexplicable feeling of, I thought I was gonna die. I was like, okay, you're telling me that I'm gonna die right now, and that was where my brain went. I was like, I'm gonna die. This is inconceivable. Like, this can't be happening. It was my dad, and now it's me, and this, how is this possible? I think that I withdrew so heavily from everything in my life at that point because I saw the surgery on the horizon. And for me personally, being out of control in any aspect of my life is probably the thing that spikes my anxiety. I love being able to articulate things and control things.
You're a scientist.
I'm a scientist. This is what I do. This is what I live for. I live for controlling the experiments to reach the answer that I want, and all these variables that I can manipulate in certain ways. And this was one variable that I could not manipulate, was that you could die. I was like, I'm only 18. Kids have this so much younger, but I don't know, it just hit me so hard because I knew what my dad had been through. I knew, medically speaking, what this meant, and I felt like I had a lot of life experience and things to live for. But up until that point, to be honest with you, I I don't think that I realized that I had so much to live for because I was almost in the mindset of like, maybe it was just easier for me to not put any stake in it. I don't like feeling bad for myself ever, but I have allowed myself moments to sit with the gravity of the situation and to acknowledge that before surgery I felt sad and I felt scared, and I told myself, okay, that's okay. Feel those feelings of sadness for yourself or for the situation, but then after you have allowed the space for those feelings, kind of let them wash over you and invite the feelings of what's next? How are we going to move forward? How am I going to navigate this situation? But I think allowing that space is necessary. You need to acknowledge the way that it makes you feel. Being a woman, a young, barely 18-year-old woman in college, experiencing life and interacting with new people at such a great volume, and having that, I knew that was going to change the way that I moved through the world. I was walking through campus one day, and I was with a friend, and he ran into his professor, and his professor had their daughter with them, and I was just interacting with the little girl, and the professor pointed out my scar, and I initially thought it was odd. I was like, oh, what are we about to say here? And the professor was like, look at her scar, show her yours. And this little girl pulled down her shirt, and she had a little sternotomy scar, and she's like, that's like me, that's like me. And I was like, that is like you, I'm like you, and that was just golden for me. I thought that was the cutest and most beautiful thing that anybody has ever said to me, because it was like, there's very little representation for a sternotomy scar out there, and so to be somebody, for a little person, a little girl, to be like, oh, there's a big girl who has that too. It's like, that's the best. Honestly, I was so lucky to come back to school with friends who treated me the exact same as they did before surgery. There was no, oh, I don't know, can you do this? Can you not do this with your heart? And it wasn't a big spectacle. They didn't make it feel like I was changed in any way. There was no ogling at my scar and, all of that. I came back, and the next day we went to the library like we always did. We drank coffee like we always did. And I would say just be there to listen to your kid, because what they're going through is very novel, and there's probably not a lot of people around them that are going through the same thing. So just being receptive and hearing what they have to say about their experience, and really taking that at its value. I said this before, we get a new lease on life, and you have to use it. You have to take it and grab it and run with it. Make it worth it. Make it worth it.